I'm Gary Kutak. I make good trouble in East Dallas. Because we live in Texanistan, you need that little glimmer of hope every morning. And so daily dispatch is absolutely, that's what you need. This resonates with me. You're not alone and you're not wrong. Almost 5 million Texans voted the same way I did. So what we need to do is go find them, shoulder and shoulder, and go make more.
It's Thursday, April 23rd, 2026, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Progress Texas amplifies progressive values, leaders, and actions through our no paywall podcasts and digital media. We make Texas politics easy to understand and to participate in. Lives in Texas are well funded by the far right, but your support for fact-based independent media hands the mic to millions of Texans. Thanks so much to Matthew Wright, Linda Miller, and Christina Ayala for their ongoing sustaining support. We really appreciate it. We start this morning, as we expected to, with an update from Houston and that city council meeting yesterday to decide on modifications put forth by Mayor John Whitmire for the city's new local police ordinance, placing limits on their interactions with ICE, which had drawn a threat from Governor Greg Abbott to claw back $114 million in public safety funding, largely for those police. Yes, a threat to quite literally defund the police in Texas's largest city from our governor. Dominic Anthony Walsh at Houston Public Media says the council voted 13-4 yesterday to accept Mayor Whitmire's amendments, while he ominously warned those council members, quote, "Austin is listening, Austin is watching," unquote, referring not only to the governor, but also to Attorney General Ken Paxton, who in tandem had filed a lawsuit to block the ordinance in a coordinated salvo by state leadership to override municipal autonomy in Houston. Mayor Whitmire, in the course of caving to state GOP control at the expense of the rights of a wide swath of the citizens he's responsible for, defends all of this as simple financial necessity. Houston's staring at a $170 million budget deficit and is hard-pressed to fund security for FIFA World Cup events coming up this summer. Backers of this capitulation to the governor will breathlessly insist that the Fourth Amendment still protects residents from arbitrary detention. But the new ICE ordinance is essentially moot at this point. The new language introduced broadens police discretion and removes clear prohibitions against ICE-driven delays. Progressive council members are calling the move a surrender to state bullying, noting that the governor is also now issuing similar threats against Austin and Dallas. Texas's major cities, under the gaze of the world at the moment, mind you, are now struggling to protect their immigrant communities while facing extreme financial retaliation from our MAGA state government. It ain't a great look. To dive a little deeper, Jacob Sullum, who writes for Reason from Dallas, notes that the basics of that same Fourth Amendment are being toyed with by Abbott and Paxton here. Houston's initial ordinance was designed to ensure local police follow the Fourth, which prohibits officers from prolonging traffic stops beyond their original purpose. That was confirmed in the Rodriguez versus United States case. SCOTUS has held that extending a detention without criminal suspicion is unconstitutional. But in contrast to that, Sullum says our governor and his AG consider that same idea to be a sanctuary city move, and by successfully bowling over this local ordinance have effectively leveraged public safety funding to pressure local law enforcement into ignoring federal constitutional limits. Houston City Council member Alejandra Salinas, in defense of the original ordinance, issued a statement saying in part, quote, "I'm disappointed in today's vote, but this fight is far from over. This has always been about protecting families, upholding the Constitution, and keeping our officers focused on solving crime, not doing the job of ICE. While I'm hopeful, based on the city attorney's assurances, that this amendment will continue to end HPD's 30-minute wait for ICE and not permit officers to detain on the basis of a civil administrative warrant alone, Houstonians shouldn't have to rely on promises when these safeguards should be written into law. I will keep fighting alongside Houstonians to defend our constitutional rights and protect families," unquote. It looks like they'll get their state funding for the moment, but legally, the city of Houston is now in a more perilous position. Their local officers have no inherent authority to enforce federal civil immigration law, yet the state's ultimatum demands they act as an arm of ICE in a way that threatens the constitutional protections of Houston residents. State-mandated cooperation with police policy does not neutralize the Bill of Rights. The city of Houston should be nervous indeed about police officers crossing that line on their dime and their watch and according to their policies. That said, and as we say a lot these days, the courts are not going to save us, perhaps best indicated lately by that call of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that it's A-OK for Texas to force our public schools to display the Ten Commandments in their classrooms. Not a surprise, really. Great analysis from Andrew Schneider at Houston Public Media, who notes that Texas, with that decision, is continuing to cement its role as the primary national laboratory for Christian nationalism, as high-ranking officials push harder and harder with greater and greater success to integrate biblical doctrine into public policy. As we talked about, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, as head of Donald Trump's Religious Liberty Commission, has recently and openly claimed that the separation of church and state is non-existent in the Constitution, and that's not just hot air. That's our future under continued Republican control. One view from outside Texas, in this case from Jen Wandra, the publisher and managing editor of the Arkansas Valley Voice, which curiously is in Colorado. Wandra sees the push for Christian nationalism in Texas as having now fully shifted from rhetoric to legal reality, and notes that this Fifth Circuit ruling is being seen by critics, including the Secular Coalition for America, as the beginnings of the formal establishment of a state-favored religion, as displaying the Christian Ten Commandments in classrooms effectively marginalizes students who are Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, on, including those who aren't religious at all. Wandra puts us on notice to watch for an upcoming report from the aforementioned Dan Patrick-led Religious Liberty Commission and advises we study up on state-funded initiatives like Freedom 250, a national program ostensibly designed to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which will arrive in just a few weeks on July 4th, but one that has come under fire for promoting a revisionist history of the U.S. as an intrinsically Christian nation. Republicans in power are now using the courts to bypass traditional church-state separation. And while the Ten Commandments decision is expected to be appealed to the Supreme Court, for those of us who value secular governance over religious indoctrination, we stand at a critical inflection point. And I'll say it once again, the courts will not save us. The only way out of this is to vote our way out. And speaking of which, in the U.S. Senate race, Ken Paxton has lately been framing his political mission as one powered by divine intervention, while the MAGA pastor advising Donald Trump's defense secretary has been calling for the crucifixion of Democratic Senate nominee James Tallarico. It is not hyperbole to see the U.S. Senate race in Texas as not just a factor in the partisan balance of power in that body, but a crucial moment in the future direction of all of this. Will the United States remain a democratic republic, or will we continue a slide towards theocratic autocracy? This election cycle, y'all, it's up to you and to me. And there are not one but two Texas elections on the radar right now. Local city elections coming up May 2nd and the statewide primary runoffs on May 26th. Early voting in those local elections is underway now. And for the midterm runoffs, your registration deadline is April 27th. That's coming up on Monday. And early voting in the runoffs will begin on May 18th. More on all of that at our carefully crafted voting information website, govotetexas.org. There's also a nice online tool from the Texas Tribune that shows you exactly who will be on your runoff ballot based on your address and your party. See that link in the show notes. Houston listeners, the next episode of our In Progress Roundtable show will come to you today on the radio in the middle of a new Thursday afternoon block of progressive political programming. In Progress starts at 6:30 p.m. every Thursday on KPFT 90.1 FM after the Progressive Forum and before the midterm show with Ernest Wittring. And it runs a second time every Sunday morning at 11 on KPFT FM HD2. With your support, we hope to expand our radio footprint beyond Houston this year. See the link in the show notes to make your tax-deductible donation to help us reach new audiences via Texas radio. We have not one but two live events on the calendar right now in both Dallas and the Houston area. First, we'll be in Cypress at the very cool Creekwood Grill for a live podcast taping with new Cy-Fair ISD board members. We want you there, but seating is limited and an RSVP is required to attend. This happens on the evening of Wednesday, May 20th. See the show notes for a link to get registered. And we're also preparing for our 16th anniversary celebration in Dallas with drinks, light bites, and a fun review of the highlights of our successes over the last few years. Save that date, which is Tuesday, June 16th, and see a link in the show notes to reserve your spot with us in Big D. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. When lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, your support for fact-based reporting is needed and appreciated. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to be taking a little bit of time off to go graduate my son from college. Progress Texas Advocacy and Development Coordinator Tatum Owens will be filling on the Daily Dispatch starting tomorrow and for the next several days. I'll be back on Wednesday, May 6th. We'll see you then.